Hello, everyone. We welcome you to our Sunday morning roundtable discussion on Sunday, October 25th, 2020. We are recording from the Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent, Plainfield, New Jersey, the United States of America. And thank you all for joining us today. And we will start with our morning prayer.
I'm reading from page 279 of the Blue Book. O God, I ask for love divine to lead me, not to be tempted or yield to temptation in any way. I ask for wisdom and grace to know and do just what God would have me do. And then she has a benediction here. Thou dost lift the burdens from the unburdened heart. Thou knowest the ones who rejoice. Thou dost comfort such as mourn. Thou dost waken the sinner from his dream of sin. Thou dost waken the sick from his dream of sickness. Thou dost make all earth's shadows flee, and the long night wake, and the shadows break on the summit of divine science with perpetual beams of life and love. Mary Baker Eddy.
Thank you. Beautiful. Care watching point.
Watch number 190. Watch lest you inadvertently fight against the action of truth as it enters your life and adjust effect to correspond to cause. War often comes because of this very necessity. Nations become wrong thinkers, and the demand of truth is that this wrong thinking be exposed, since only that way can it be corrected. War simply means that wrong thinking is being exposed so that it can be corrected. Never fancy that truth is creating an evil when it stirs up the muddy riverbed, as Science and Health says, and causes mortal mind to express itself as discord and evil instead of as human good. The Master said, "Think not that I am come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword." Truth comes to show that the effect of an evil cause must be evil, an intent to destroy, which corresponds with cause. It should never be a peace when there is no peace. Job had to learn the lesson that the so-called harmony he enjoyed, with God left out, was deception. Job had permitted matter to take the place of God as the head of his procession. He was loving effect more than cause. This offense of mortal man always terminates in discord, and the sooner it does, the sooner will mortal man be driven to correct his error. And
Okay, comments on that?
well,
Go
ahead.
I think that that's what's going on today, which is, we've talked about it before, but we sort of lost our focus on where all the good that this country was achieving was coming from. We thought it was all us, man, doing all this. And so what's come to the surface is it's just all this that needed to come up for us to see what's been going on behind the scenes. We needed to look at it so we could, we know how to handle it in Christian Science. But that's what's been going on.
Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely. We've talked about it, in ourselves. Sometimes it takes a while to get into a certain situation. It takes a while to get out of it. Well, we were sleeping in many ways to get us to this point where our country has gotten, in many ways, so secular. So now there's been a great awakening, and that's always a good thing. Thank you, Karen. Others? Linda, what were you going to
say? With God was left out. You were having harmony, but God was left out. So it was a deception, but you guys said it very well.
Yeah, you cannot really have harmony when God is left out. And people that think they are, they're headed for a crash. As I've told you, we used to have on our bulletin board this cartoon of someone lying on a raft and just so thinking everything was so great. And what, Craig, do you remember?
Oh, there was a waterfall.
He was about to go over a waterfall. He was facing the other direction, so he couldn't see that he was about to just go over this huge waterfall. So many of you have learned this lesson. If you haven't, it's hard to avoid it. And it does talk about Job. And also, even if you think you're enjoying that kind of peace, most of you know too, it's peace where there is no peace. You know darn well you're not peaceful. You know darn well there are things going on in your home or wherever that are not peaceful. And it causes anxiety until you face it and let it come out to the surface. But you can't ignore it. You know, I was so grateful for Mrs. Evans for that, because boy, did she sniff it out. Human harmony. And, you know, she would say, you're sitting on a keg of TNT. So, and you are. There's no such thing as human harmony. And that, thank God for carpenters, because they tell you this, don't they? No uncertain terms. No one ever laid it out as clearly as the carpenter, Gilbert Carpenter, in his books. So thank you for that watching point. Anybody else?
Well, I know human making it right either.
No?
Only God makes it right.
Thank you. Because you can try humanly to fix it, and it won't work. Charity?
Truth will bring it out. This is what I liked about this watch.
Yes.
It will not be ignored. I mean, you think you're going to ignore it.
You're going to hope you're going to ignore it.
Will bring it out.
Yeah.
Well, the anxiety that results from trying to cover up something that's wrong is not peace.
Right.
And, you know, it says that in the lesson where it says, even the disposition to excuse guilt or to conceal it is punished. The avoidance of justice and the denial of truth tend to perpetuate sin, invoke crime, jeopardize self-control, and mock divine mercy. And sometimes it's very easy, especially with people you love, you want to cover up. Especially, I mean, it's awful if you do it to a child. Try to protect them in some way, and it's gonna explode in flames eventually. You cannot. Better let them learn their lessons early, or they will be disciplined by what does Mrs. Eddy say?
Scaffold or
Prison.
Yep. Who wants that? The prison or the scaffold? What's a scaffold?
People are hung.
I think one of the big problems is that recognizing right and wrong, and I think this is where the Bible and Christian Science is so important, and what Mrs. Eddy teaches is that the slightest wrong is completely wrong. There are no equivocations for wrong, because what's happened not only to Christian Science, but also to the Constitution is that it's done page by page. First they put a little bit of something on that's a little wrong. People ignore that, and then there's another page and another page until here, 200 years later, we've got this pile of things that completely obscure the Constitution. And that's exactly what happened with the Bible. After Christ taught the right way of doing things, centuries of misconception, and that's what we're battling today, is that we come into the world and we have all these misconceptions, and all of a sudden Christian Science comes along. That's so confusing to somebody who hasn't had that from birth, to recognize that God truly is great and right and real and wonderful, because everything that's been shown of it has been, all this corrupt view of God and religion.
Well, it does clear up the misconceptions, doesn't it? It takes it out of the human and puts it back where it came from, which is the divine. And only the divine inspired reading of the Bible is what gives it clarity and usefulness. It's always the human mind that screws things up, that creates the confusion. Same with our Constitution. Mrs. Eddy says our Constitution has foundation. She saw the spiritual divine purpose behind it. And we should keep that spiritual divine purpose foremost in our thought if we want to have a proper human government. Otherwise, you're right. It gets corrupted and watered down, and we lose sight of God's purpose.
Yeah, and what was that quote that you found, Linda, about how the Constitution was necessary for?
To lay the foundation for Christian Science, that it was solid and a foundation that couldn't be it would protect the church, unlike anything else. I can't remember exactly.
It's that strong tree that the wave can't hold down.
Would protect the church like nothing else could.
Until the end.
Yes, until the end. Yeah, that analogy, or maybe it was a true story. A bad storm came and people ran into the church. The church was destroyed, but people that hung on to the big trees, they survived it. So this is why what's going on in our country right now is so important, that we preserve these God-given values.
Because the attacks that we see going on in our country are attacks on the Constitution. They are attacks on the law that is the foundation of our society. They're also attacks on the church, that goes along with it.
I think that's...
Lawrence?
No, I was just going to say that's why a little wrong there should be no such thing a little wrong, because Mrs. Evans, I remember on one of the he was saying there's no such thing as a little pregnant.
That's right. Yeah.
So that brings it home. Mm-hmm.
Yes, it does. And what Mike was saying before, that, it's not a gray zone. It's either right or wrong. Okay, Mike, did you want to...
Yes,
I can just put in a plug. Go on.
What I wanted to say was... I just wanted to put in a
plug for Constitution.
Go ahead, Mike.
What I was going to say was, and that's the same thing as the Constitution, is the church manual, knowing the church manual. Because how many times was I told that the estoppel clauses really didn't mean that? Mrs. Eddy really didn't mean it. Well, she meant it completely.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to put that around to the manual. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
and then the other thing is that I don't remember exactly which point it is, but there's one that she had written up that it's the spirit behind what is written, what anybody writes about it, and that's the difference between Plainfield lessons and the CSBOD lessons. I mean, sometimes they use many sections, and sometimes they use different Bibles and maybe even different science and health by now. I don't know about that one. But the point is that then if they do them as Mrs. Eddy left the lessons in that manner, why is that any better than one that uses an obscure Bible? I mean, if they can't do one of them right, how can they do the other ones right?
Well, and you're right, Mike. The whole point is, what is the spirit behind what is written? What is the thought of the writer? Was the writer inspired by God, or was it the human mind? And that's the only thing that matters. And that's the only difference This isn't a matter of, Plainfield being humanly better than the Boston Board of Directors. No, there's no human judgment. There's no human comparison. It's either divine, inspired, or it's not. And that is the test with anything.
But Plainfield is...
if something inspired came out of Boston, we would rejoice.
Yeah, and that book, The Christian Healer, was one, and I'm rejoicing in that. And I never would have known about it if it hadn't been for Dale A., who sent me a copy. So, yeah, anything, we do rejoice. So, good, divine good is worth rejoicing about in whatever way. So, well, we need to move on now to the last.
Quickly, I did want to say, though, but that's the most important thing I think that I've learned at Plainfield is how to test whether it's spiritual or not by that gut feeling one has, the feeling that I always, through my whole life, ignored. And now I learn from Plainfield that that's the part that is God speaking to us and we have to listen to.
Thank you.
That is the foundation stone that the builders rejected. Yes. Thank you.
And like the watching point says, mortal mind always terminates in discord. So
it does.
It's good to know that.
It does. Not always does. So that's what we do is we stay out of it. If you stay out of it, you're doing good. Okay. Subject, probation after death, and our golden text, Lil.
The Lord knoweth how to deliver the godly out of temptations.
And we had a good discussion yesterday on the Bible study about responsive reading, but a few of you wrote on the forum, and maybe we can just touch on that, about let patience have her perfect work, that ye may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. Karen.
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can. We can.
Okay, well, like you said, we did touch on this yesterday, but I just found this very interesting in my Students' New Testament compilation. That, boy, I wish I could get it on more of them on the online. But anyway, I found that what it says. Notice that the language of the text puts aside the common notion that patience is a passive grace. The patience of my text does work. The patience that James would have us all cultivate is an intensely active energy and not a mere passive endurance. There is much force that goes to standing motionless when the wind is blowing. But for all that, the mere bearing of trouble by no means covers the whole ground of this royal and supreme virtue to which my text is here exhorting us. It is the fixed determination to bate not one jot of heart or hope, but still bear up and steer right onwards, in spite of all hindrances and antagonisms which may storm against us. It is perseverance in the teeth of the wind, and not merely keeping our place in spite of it, that James exhorts to here. The ship with sails wisely set, and a firm hand at the tiller, and a keen eye on the compass, that uses the utmost blast to bear it near its desired haven, is the higher form of patience.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, very well said. And yeah, because some people think of patience as just sitting idly by and sighing and
waiting for something to happen.
Yeah, and this is far from it. I love it says a royal and supreme virtue, and so it is. And patience must have her perfect work.
Well, impatience is selfishness.
Thank you. Yes, and I was going to say, Florence, what did you write about impatience?
I think it's so good to have these words more explained, because then it shakes you into not wanting it at all. In Ann Beals's book, The Law of Love, she says that impatience, the false trait, usually comes from thwarted self-will that is intolerant of delay, opposition, or obstacles to what it wants or expects of others. Impatience can go from irritation to anger to rage over having to wait for any reason. It puts pressure on others by being aggressive, restless, agitated, ill-tempered with them. An impatient mentality is often impetuous and impulsive. This trait is seldom classified as sin, yet it is deadly sin. Habitual impatience can lead to difficult, stubborn, even seemingly incurable physical problems. So, I mean, this tells you we don't want to be impatient. And really, you are around somebody who's impatient, or that attitude of impatience, you can lose friends, you can lose opportunities even, because you have not a minute to wait for anything. Always go off, and nobody wants to be around you. So there it is.
Thank you.
Need to be patient.
Thank you. Because it brings out the point that patience, true patience, is humility. You're waiting on God's direction only when you're patient. And impatience is the human will, which is a killer, as Florence just read.
Yeah. Wow. Listen up to this, really, because many people think maybe you don't indulge in that, but make sure you do not. And you see it in homes, and impatient with a child, or impatient with the wife, or impatient with the husband, whoever. Anger, nastiness. It breeds all kinds of carnal mind situations. So watch out. Thank you. Very, very good. Thank you, Florence. And then what Joe wrote, how the temptations, when they're met, they make us stronger, and they temper us like steel, which is one of the strongest metals. And then this was so beautiful, what she found in Pulpit and Press on page 82 by Mrs. Eddy. Speaking of the new woman, quote, "Her hand is tender, but steel tempered with holy resolve. She is soft and gentle, but you could no more turn her from her course than winter could stop the coming of spring." That's setting your face like a what? Flint to Jerusalem.
And the flint is, what did you say about flint?
Oh, that when you chip it and sharpen it, you can get it to a sharper point than you can steel.
Wow.
Thinking of this soft and gentle, but still resolves, reminded me, Miss Zeddy talked about how she would bend like a blade of grass.
Yes.
And I don't know, sometimes you see grass coming up in parking lots and between concrete, it just won't be stopped.
That's right. No, I really.
Mm-hmm. You can't even pull it out sometimes.
Yes. It's a mighty power, and it's the power of God when God is behind it, just as it was with Mrs. Eddy. It's such a beautiful statement that she couldn't be turned, no more than the winter can be turned when it comes into spring. Anyway, it was beautifully said by Mrs. Eddy, and so true. And that's what we must have in our heart. And this is the importance of commitment, because people who are unwilling to commit, well, I'll see how it works. Maybe if it works, I'll do it. Oh, maybe, but if anything goes wrong, I'm out of here. Well, once you decide this is the way, walk ye in it, then your commitment, you need to flex those muscles, because as we are going to talk about now, there will be so many wonderful temptations to take you off. And so maybe I'll have Gary. Well, Gary, you can start, because we're going to get into the temptations of Jesus. You can start reading what Parthens wrote, I guess.
Yeah, this is Parthens on the forum. In keeping with this week's lesson on the subject of dealing with the unreality of evil, Mrs. Eddy has said, quote, "To be delivered from believing in what is unreal, from fearing it, following it, or loving it, one must watch and pray that he enter not into temptation. even as one guards his door against the approach of thieves. Wrong is thought before it is acted. You must control it in the first instance, just as Jesus had to do throughout his trial in the wilderness, or it will control you in the second. To overcome all wrong, it must become unreal to us. And it is good to know that wrong has no divine authority. Therefore, man is its master. End quote. And that's from the message to the Mother Church for 1901. With each confrontation with evil in the wilderness, Jesus condemned it, yet not because the power of evil was real to him, but because it was unreal to him. In sharply condemning evil, he absolutely refused to let evil mesmerize him into accepting it as reality. Jesus said to his followers, quote, I give you power over all the power of the enemy, end quote. If evil is unreal, why would Jesus say such a thing? Why would Jesus require his followers, past, present, and future, to confront, condemn, and cast out evil, something that is non-existent? Mrs. Eddy continues, quote, error uncondemned is not nullified. We must condemn the claim of error in every phase in order to prove it false, therefore unreal, end quote. It is not enough simply to believe that evil is unreal. We must prove it to be unreal. In the same way, a math teacher does not allow an error to remain on the blackboard, except to point out its inaccuracy.
Very good. So, I was thinking one of the common forms of temptation today is this idea of lust and pornography that's seems to be everywhere, movies and computers and things. And, how does it work? First it lures you into thinking it's going to be something good, and then it lures you into looking and putting images in your thought. And then it lures you a little more until finally you're perhaps committing an act of adultery or whatever that's condemned in the 10 Commandments, in the laws of God. And then if you think about it, if you take it further, where is all this leading you? It's leading you in a terrible path, one of destruction.
Loss of control.
Loss of control. You're like what's obsessed with the pictures. You can't think straight. It keeps coming to you. And we know God doesn't lead us into temptation. So this is something else that's leading. This is ourselves, our own untamed carnal desires, so to speak. But to me, sometimes if you're ever tempted, what road is this taking to you? And when you see the utter destruction and despair that it is taking you into, then you can say, okay, I do not want this. And you can realize it's unreality and say, nope, not going there, and stop it. And that is proving it's unreality. Otherwise, you have put yourself in the the carnal mind, the human mind, and you are liable to all kinds of horrible things. All kinds of horrible things, which ultimately, and the Bible says this too, it leads to death. Death, ruin. And you see it, don't you see it in the world with politicians and famous athletes and everything? They rise up, they're making all this money, they're getting adulation, and then some woman comes along or some temptation comes along, and they just go crashing. Sometimes all their money, everything they built up is gone, their marriage, everything. Think about that. It's like taking a cold shower, okay? Don't go worse. There. Well, yeah, a lot worse. So,
and to me, that's what James was talking about on verse 21 here in the responsive reading, where he says, lay apart all filthiness and superfluity of naughtiness, And what does superfluity mean? Anybody ever wonder about that?
Overindulgence, maybe? I don't know.
No, it means superfluous.
Yeah, over.
What does superfluous mean? It means totally unnecessary. Totally unnecessary. That is his way of saying it's unreal to God. Therefore, it should be unreal to us. But it's totally unnecessary. It has nothing to do with having a good life. And that's what Mary's talking about here.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yep. So why go there? Don't go there. Don't let that tempter speak to you. And of course, it speaks in many other ways. And here we're going to see how it spoke to Jesus. I thought it was interesting. What do we know? Jesus was led up of the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. And what had preceded this? Do you remember? We've talked about it.
Yes, his baptism, the higher baptism.
Yes. Yep. And I looked at a few commentaries about this, mostly Spurgeon and Matthew Henry, but one of them, this was not Spurgeon, but he said, I thought this was interesting. It was a remarkable contrast between the glory following Jesus' baptism and the challenge to be tempted by the devil. Then the cool waters of Jordan, now the barren wilderness. Then the huge crowds, now solitude and silence. Then the Spirit rests like a dove. Now the Spirit drives him into the wilderness. Then the voice of the Father calling him beloved Son. Now the hiss of Satan, the tempter. Then the anointed. Now the attacked. Then the water of baptism. Now the fire of temptation. First the heavens opened. Now hell. What does all this mean?
Challenge? Or is it when a game was made and that game was challenged?
Thank you.
Thank you. Exactly.
That's it.
Don't ever get discouraged when a challenge or a temptation comes to you. It came to Jesus. So don't let it get you down. Don't let it get you.
and right after being called, this is my beloved Son whom I am well pleased. Okay, now let's see. Why? This is why. Because he stood up to those challenges. He proved himself that this wasn't just pie in the sky. He proved himself. He was loyal to God and to no other. Lawrence, did you want to speak?
Yeah, I saw something in the Blue Book, page 145. It says that every spiritual baptism is followed by stronger temptations. That is, each higher manifestation of truth uncovers its supposititious opposite to be met and destroyed. Thus we rise step by step until we finally reach a condition which has no erroneous phenomenal expression. And it goes on about Jesus' temptation,
That is wonderful. That is a perfect explanation of this. It's a way of rising higher. If you weren't tempted, you just stay in one spot. But when you get tempted, you have to show where are you? Adam, where art thou? Are you going to rise above it or not? And here with the Christ, first he fasted 40 days and 40 nights. So he was obviously what? Hungry.
Good.
Very. I mean, I can't imagine. I've heard these. Well, anyway. So how was he tempted? The first temptation?
Make bread of the stones.
Yes.
Just perfect temptation, right?
Perfect.
So hungry here, make bread and eat.
Something in the food.
Yes. Yep.
To satisfy the hunger was something human rather than divine.
Thank you. Good.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello, this is Ingrid. I just wanted to share that with David when he said, "There is no one upon earth that I desire beside God." And then right after that, I guess there was no alert, awake, and aware. We call this the AAA. And then he got into all this women drama and women affairs or whatever. And it was right after he really declared that and stood for that. And that's something that has blessed me a lot.
And that's so true. I mean, that's why you have to be careful what you declare. I mean, I don't know how many times you've heard people say, "I'll never leave this church." I mean, they've stood up and given it in testimonies. Now, and then goodbye. They're gone. They're gone. 2 weeks later, they're gone. Don't
goodbye. Not even a goodbye. No, just
not even a goodbye.
It's usually a bad bye.
And then in the next, which the story of Peter, where it says, "Though all men shall be offended because of thee, yet will I never be offended. And then verily I say unto you that this night before the cock crow thou shalt deny me thrice." He said, "Though I should die with thee, yet I will not deny thee. Likewise said all the disciples." And then it's almost comical. Then all the disciples forsook him in flesh. Yeah. I mean, I maybe I shouldn't laugh, but it just is so like, oh my gosh, here they're all, "No, I'll never go. I'll never leave you." And then whoops. So do be careful what you declare. Maybe better leave it quiet to yourself. Don't.
And Peter wept bitterly after that.
Well, he did after he.
Of course he did. Yeah.
Yes, he did. And
can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, and that's also when ways that are vain are so amazingly good to make us aware of what is going on and what's the way that error operates.
Thank you.
That we can declare and have the strength of knowing what will go on after we declare a spiritual truth or stand for something spiritual.
Yes, we're going to.
Yes, ways that are vain.
Yeah, we're going to end with ways that are vain.
Yeah, exactly.
Craig, what were you going to say?
Jesus was remarkable, and I could see because his strength was in that he went to God for answers, and I realize that none of us have the whole story, and that until we do as he does and really get the answer from God, we can't argue with a lie up to a point. At some point, you just have to stand your ground and just go to God for the next step. Because I don't hate to say this, but the devil's human mind is smarter than I am.
Thank you very much.
Well, and that's why nobody wins an argument.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right. You don't want to go there.
Thank you, Craig.
Thank you, Craig.
And that too, that was another lesson we learned here. Mrs. Evans used to tell us that. And, especially a smart human being, they have all the answers. Gary was a very smart, he was a hard one to argue with. And when he was in the wrong mind, he had every answer. And the only way was either not to engage it or to answer with "it is written." But he is totally changed now. So this is a past experience.
Well, right. I mean, the thing is, this process that we're talking about here of being tested is something that happens to every student of Christian Science, right? I mean, I don't know anybody that hasn't experienced this. When you see the light of Christian Science and you study it with your whole heart and soul and grow spiritually, you're going to be tested. I mean, it's going to happen. So so be ready for it. Be prepared. It will test you in every different way. And the purpose of the tests is for each one of us to get rid of every ounce of pride that would block our growth. Get rid of every ounce of whatever we cherish that's not godlike, so that we don't have idols in the way. It's That's what the tests are for. So when you're tested, keep your joy and, and face up to the test and recognize what the test is for. Don't get discouraged.
And don't be surprised by it.
And don't run away from it.
Come.
Yep. That's what Jeremy says. There you are.
And don't blame Christian Science when you don't, when you get the tests. Don't say Christian Science doesn't work.
And don't blame God, because it's not God. It's your own carnal thinking that's
coming up.
It's coming up.
It's fighting for its own life. And the only life it has is the life you give it.
And it's also what we were talking about, that when we stand for something higher and better and that is going to do so much good, we're going to have opposition. So when we study Christian Science, Edward would love that we stop it.
Yeah, and it's just the human mind opposing. It's only the human mind who doesn't want its own destruction.
I think it was Spurgeon who said that this temptation was an example of using God's gifts for selfish purposes. And haven't we seen in science, it can be a great danger when you get your health, you get a huge sense of supply, beautiful homes or what, all these things, your kids are going to all the Ivy League schools or whatever. Because this is not the purpose of Christian Science. This is a great fallacy. If those things come, and if God is in the middle of them, if, as Gary ended last week's with, if God is in the middle of them, it's maybe a byproduct of your knowing God better. But you see, it's become where this is the purpose of it. Oh, well, I'll change the rocks into bread. I'm going to have all this stuff. And it's stuff. And won't this be great? It's a huge temptation. No, This is not what science is about. Science is for the spiritualization of thought, the spiritualization of all mankind, and the uplifting of the race. And any of this are byproducts. And if you don't keep them byproducts, they will become your masters. They will
consume you.
They will consume you. Yes. So what was Jesus' answer? What was the answer he gave? Jeremy?
He said, "It is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeded out of the mouth of God."
So he was unimpressed, even though he was starving and everything. He wasn't impressed by this. He knew it was a subtle suggestion to start getting things, and he turned it back to God. And of course, we've talked many times. He said, "It is written," and I believe it was Spurgeon, only the sword against Satan, the only sword against Satan is the word of God. This is why you study it. This is why you know the word. This is why, so you're ready when those temptations come. And this is living it. This is handling animal magnetism. This is what we're talking about. It's handling the error. It's confronting it with the word of God, which Jesus knew. And I read too that all of these "it is written" came from the book of Deuteronomy. He knew his Bible, what it was at that time. So he put that one down, and then he was taken up into the holy city, which is probably Jerusalem, and setteth him on a pinnacle. And then what is the temptation?
To jump and let the angels catch.
Go maybe where you weren't supposed to go.
Yeah. And so what did Satan quote?
The 91st Psalm.
He will have his angels charge.
Yeah, the 91st Psalm.
Really.
And this shows, as Craig started out, the craftiness, okay? The craftiness of the I'm quoting the Bible, okay? You're going to quote me the Bible, I'll quote you back. But, if you look at what he quoted, he left out a little bit of it. He said, "He shall give his angels charge concerning thee, and in their hands they shall bear thee up, lest at any time thou shalt dash thy foot against a stone. Do you know what little part he left out? This is why you need to memorize this.
Thy ways?
Yes. He shall give his angels charge concerning thee to keep thee in all thy ways. Including this situation. But we won't talk about that. And you see when
we'll take it out of context and try to make you look bad.
Yes.
Yeah.
And often when people quote scriptures to you, and you know it's not God speaking, they take things out of context, don't they? Mm-hmm. But in order to know that, you've got to know the scripture yourself. So, and this is the, I guess, call it the pride of life, or, you know, let show us your stuff. And even it was a challenge. If okay, prove it to me. Okay, this goes to, you're in a home, all your family is watching you. You think you have some physical problem, and you got to prove it to them all. You're going to prove it, because if I'm a Christian Scientist, I'm going to heal this. Wrong motive, wrong thought. Nope, don't go there. You don't have anything to prove. You've lost your humility. God is a healer. You're not trying to show off to anybody anything. So he says, it is written again. And what was the answer?
Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God.
Yes.
Yes, you can't get away with doing something stupid and expect God to bail you out.
Yeah.
Yes.
Leave my doors open.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I read recently someone, I think it was in the Blue Book. Someone, I'm a Christian Scientist, so I can walk at night in these not so good parts of town or something. And Mrs. Eddy rebuked that. And with this, thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. You don't do stupid things. We use wisdom in everything we do, always. Mrs. Evans used to tell us, when you leave all your doors open and you leave your car doors open and you leave the keys in the car, she said you're being unloving to people who might be tempted to do the wrong thing. That's not love.
I wanted to say what you said first about you're on display and you're pretty science, so you have all this pressure to prove that that you can be healthy, and that takes away all your ability to help anybody else. That's really hitting below the belt, and it's hard. You really face it. Hard to see, actually, at first.
Well, it's true. Well, it comes very almost naturally to people. They think they've got to prove something in their family. I hear it. I just want to show my husband that that this works. Well, again, it works over and over and over and over and over. If he really wants to know, he can see it working. It's a wrong motive. It's a wrong sense of things. That's not why you do it. You do it to glorify God, but not for any other reason.
And then you had those people who saw the healing of the cancer in stage 4 and then did nothing, so it doesn't help anyways.
Thank you very much. That's exactly right. So
it's for the bears, the same bears that came to Jesus, right?
Yes.
And I wanted to say thank you, Mary, for bringing this pride about the students of Christian Science. That you're so well financially, you have so much for generation, this and that, and all that pride. And it came to me that is sitting on your blessings instead of sharing the blessings, is just sitting on them.
Thank you.
It was a blessing. Yeah.
Good way to say it. Yes.
And when you sit on your blessings, you lose.
You lose. It ends in total destruction and despair. No one is blessed by the selfish intake of God's blessings, and they will stop because you have to share what you've been given. And Anyway, so the next temptation, he's taken on a high mountain, here again, lofty, showeth all the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them. And I'll give them all to you if you only will fall down and worship me. Mm-hmm. Here it is. Well, the lust of the eyes, someone said. This, again, pride of life. And this is selling your soul to the devil, truly. Mm-hmm. Truly it is. And that's when Jesus came back hard and did what?
Get thee behind me.
Get thee hence, Satan.
Yes.
Yeah. Get out of here.
And you see, this is what we have to be willing to do, because the tempter will be very aggressive. And unless you're aggressive back, it'll keep trying to bug you. And in the Blue Book, I thought this was very helpful. The preachers speak of Jesus as though he were always so placid, never ruffled, while really he was very stern. The scriptures speak of him as saying to his disciples and to Satan, "Get thee behind me, Satan." And just before he ascended, he called them fools. I used to be very amiable before coming into Christian Science, was a peacemaker at home when arguments about temperance, politics, and philosophy would arise. But now I am stern. Don't ever be afraid to be stern. It's part of who and what we are. We don't fool around with these suggestions. So he overcame them all, and then what happened to him?
The angels
came and ministered unto him.
And so it will be with all of us.
There was one of the commentaries that I read about that last where it said the reward, not the objective. Very nice.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Very true. So now we will end ways that are vain from Mrs. Eddy.
Ways that are vain. Animal magnetism, in its ascending steps of evil, entices its victim by unseen, silent arguments. Reversing the modes of good in their silent allurements to health and holiness, it impels mortal mind into error of thought and tempts into the committal of acts foreign to the natural inclinations. The victims lose their individuality and lend themselves as willing tools to carry out the designs of their worst enemies, even those who would induce their self-destruction. Animal magnetism fosters suspicious distrust where honor is due, fear where courage should be strongest, reliance where there should be avoidance, a belief in safety where there is most danger. And these miserable lies, poured constantly into his mind, fret and confuse it, spoiling that individual's disposition, undermining his health, and sealing his doom, unless the cause of the mischief is found out and destroyed. Other minds are made dormant by it, and the victim is in a state of semi-individuality, with a mental haziness which admits of no intellectual culture or spiritual growth. The state induced by this secret evil influence is a species of intoxication, in which the victim is led to believe and do what he would never otherwise think or do voluntarily. Unless one's eyes are opened to the modes of mental malpractice, working so subtly that we mistake its suggestions for the impulses of our own thought, the victim will allow himself to drift in the wrong direction without knowing it. Be ever on guard against this enemy. Watch your thoughts and see whether they lead you to God and into harmony with his true followers. Guard and strengthen your own citadel more strongly. Thus you will grow wiser and better through every attack of your foe, and the golden rule will not rust for lack of use or be misinterpreted by the adverse influence of animal magnetism. Mary Baker Eddy.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you.